Should we get going?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm John Jorgensen from Rutgers. This is Elmer Masters from CALI, and we're going to talk about established systems, legacy systems, and technical debt. We have very few slides, thank God. And as we discuss this, the topic, I'm sure you will agree with me, Elmer, got very diffused very quickly.
I think it was diffused from the start, John.
It was diffused from the start. And as we tried to narrow it down, it consistently resisted focusing. And to a certain extent, that's probably a good thing to go with, because there's lots of aspects to managing IT over time, which is really the point of what we're talking about and some of the problems and pitfalls that come up with it. So we thought we would categorize things a little bit, talk about the different kinds of problems that come up with the different categories and some of the issues that we've dealt with over the years. And it's just things that we've dealt with over the years. And everybody in this room probably has their own issues as well. So it would be good to make this more of a conversation, certainly as we go on and get things rolling. So I hope that starts. And Sarah, we do still have an extra chair up here for you for that very purpose, because you are here.
Oh, should I advance the slide, or do I have other things?
Would you like to?
Sure, let's advance the slide. Let's get this show on the road. I know, right? Hey, I'm a big believer in, those template things. So actually, it occurs to me that this title should actually be Legacy and Established Systems, because we're going to they kind of lump together. I mean, an established system is something that's probably well maintained and you're running and people are using it, and and it's just got to keep running is the big thing. Whereas a legacy system might be something that's considerably older, probably isn't being maintained properly anymore, and you wish it would go away. I think everybody's got those. I know we got a couple at CALI. And so but even inside of that, inside of those systems, there are different aspects to those things, right? So you've got, you've got homebrew stuff, so things that you've written. Which, first question for the audience: how many folks have IT shops where you're running, where you're responsible for maintaining custom-built applications? Okay, that's more than the zero that, well, they're like LII doesn't count, CALI doesn't count, because later when I ask how many vendor-built systems are you running, then they don't have to raise their hand at all, because who's doing that? Okay, so these are things that you're, that you've built and that you're responsible for. Customized systems, well, let's sort of flip these around, right? So complex turnkey systems are typically the sort of software you buy, systems you buy that are provided by a vendor. I presume everybody's running at least one of those somewhere, student records, admissions, all that sort of stuff, right? But a lot of those have customized things built on top of them, right? So how many folks are using sort of vendor-based systems like for admissions or financial aid and stuff, but you built custom stuff on top of that? Right, and so you have to keep that up, and there's so not only do you have to maintain the custom parts, but you've also got to then keep up with the changes that get made to the underlying vendor system also, right? So, let's, whoops, wrong, oh man, foiled by my own, there we go. So this is my list of all the complex vendor systems I could think of in law schools. Or we could really just say that law schools today really are one giant-sized complex vendor system, right? I mean, everybody's using various packages for that cover a lot of these areas, right? Library management systems. Anybody roll their own library management system? Would anybody like to roll their own library management system? Yes. Oh man, how many? Oh, here's a good question for librarians in the room too. How many librarians have been using this? Has your library been using the same library management system for like more than 7 years? Oh wow, I thought that'd be more. How many people don't even know if your law school has a library management system? No. I know yours is changing. Yeah, how many people in the room got messed up with some kind of weird consortium of academic libraries where they're now being forced to move their library system into a cloud-based thing that they don't fully comprehend in 60 days? Or in less than 60 days, right? And then there's the admission systems, which I guess people still using stuff from LSAC. Is that's still the admissions package, right? Career placement stuff. People were just talking on Technoids about this week about career placement packages, which actually hadn't popped up on Technoids in quite a number of years. So I know those are out there. And then things like student records and financial aid and other like registrar systems I hadn't even put on here are usually now tied into, if you're part of a larger university, they're part of your bigger university system. But you might have some custom stuff built on top of that. And then things like exam software and then et cetera, which could be. I mean, what other kinds of systems are people? Well, I'm going to get into some other stuff, but what other kinds of packaged software sort of stuff besides like Windows, obviously, which. Clinic stuff. Oh, clinic stuff, right? All the case management and that sort of stuff. Sure. Okay.
Calendar scheduling type stuff.
All right, calendar scheduling type stuff. Yeah, I guess I think of that as Microsoft Office these days.
Plagiarism.
Oh, right, the plagiarism systems, yeah, there we go. See, I knew there was more out there somewhere.
Tree, the scheduling stuff can be complex.
Yeah, like room scheduling and stuff, yeah. Yes, that's, what is it, R25 or something like that was one of them?
That's one of them.
Yeah. Oh, I still remember a few things from working in law schools directly. It's all fading now. So, and then we have customized systems, which is sort of see above, but nothing works when you turn it on, right? I mean, to a certain extent, any one of these packages have to be customized in order to work in your environment, and so that requires somebody to do it. You might pay, consultants to set it up, but they go away, and then you're sort of left with whatever they set up, and so you still have to deal with it. So,
web templates.
Probably
the most basic example of them.
Yes.
I don't think most people design their own websites anymore. You always get a consultant come in and give you a massive amount of templates and a massive amount of JavaScript in their own personal customized version of Drupal with their own not well-maintained or well-maintained, as the case may be, modules that they've added on, so you can stay dependent on them. But then, to maintain the website, you add on, you have to write your own material, you start from a certain place, but you have to do a lot of work. Quite frankly, scheduling systems are very much like that.
Right, yeah. Yeah, because almost, because things like semesters vary, and there's a lot of, different amounts of different rooms and things. Okay, and then there's I did it again. I'm reaching all the way over. I should just do that. Nice. Sometimes, yeah, it's touchscreen. So it's 4K too. It's really nice. So there's locally developed applications. So in libraries, you might have things like exam banks, online reserves. They're typically homebrewed type things. Or maybe they're not anymore. I don't know. Maybe I've lost touch with that. But does anybody still put that stuff online?
Like exam banks? Yeah.
Exam banks and sure, okay, I thought so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Online seating charts. Anybody roll their own? Or are they still? Because yeah, I know people look at each other and go, "No, we quit doing that a long time ago." Yeah. And then things like WordPress and Drupal. John just mentioned Drupal. And I think of those as like locally developed because you end up with like this framework that really has to be built out somehow. I mean, you can't just. I mean, you flip the switch on a Drupal site, on Drupal installer, WordPress, or Joomla, or anything else like that. And has anybody used Joomla before? No, okay, that's fine. You flip the switch on any of that stuff, and you sort of get that, hello world thing, and then, how do I make it look like, all this other stuff? And there's a bunch of work there too. So the folks that have locally developed applications, what sort of space are they in terms of like what departments and offices are using them? Nobody? Suddenly nobody wants to talk about it? That's okay. So, because, when I was at Cornell had a lot of its own, and we had two database programmer types on staff in the IT department who were responsible for software that powered through a bunch of the registrar's office stuff and admissions at the time. And although I think we were using tailored solutions for career placement, I still have the mug, by the way. Yeah, I know, right? Elmer's Wonderful World of Collectible Mugs from Law School Technology. It's a small shelf, but it's exciting. And we did. I think at the time Cornell was even though we were using some of the LSAC stuff, there was another. We were doing some custom stuff on top of that for admissions too. So. And I know a lot of that subsequently went away because I think like Cornell's now like a PeopleSoft sort of place, and so everything's been rolled into, student. Here's a key thing about PeopleSoft. One of the things I loved when they rolled into the education market is that they assumed that students were the equivalent of employees for HR for purposes. I know, it was exciting, right? Well. If it employed plenty of consultants at $300 an hour, sorting that out. But so there's all those sorts of things. So that's like a lot of stuff that potentially falls in an IT department of, how many people have IT departments in their law school that have like more than 2 people in them? Oh, okay, that's good. They must have all come to this session. Whereas all the people were like, man, I got just me and the other guy. We're going to run out of slides really fast, so if anybody's got any questions, now's the time to get to them.
Well, we've got a lot to say after the slides. This is the setup.
Oh, this is the setup? Okay. Well, why don't you can take it. I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Yeah. I'm not sure I actually want to stick with this slide a lot. No, okay. Actually, it's a good start. So I was thinking, and in our conversation, I think it was clear that you were thinking about these things as well, Elmer. What technical debt actually consists of and how it seems to be working. I'm not actually sure that it's typical of the people in this room, so it may be a little bit off for the audience here, but I think probably, actually almost certainly, law schools in general fall into this pattern, even if individual library or law schools don't, and maybe not the people in here. But for example, what I've seen over the years here at the CALI conference, the people who come here, when I first started coming, for example, we were giving lessons to each other in regular expressions and how to write things in Perl. And at a certain point, the necessary level of sophistication that started growing in law school IT departments changed, and people started talking about buying vendor solutions because vendor solutions were actually appearing and were good enough to use. And people started talking about outsourcing. People started giving presentations on what the university IT should be doing and is now doing rather than law IT. And to a certain extent, this has been a problem with innovation as well as dealing with legacy applications, is that as that's happened, the need, at least the perceived need, for expertise within the law school has gone down. And I know the expertise, I mean, when we hire new people, we may want to spend a lot of money on somebody who has a knowledge of programming, but then the question from on high is, well, why do we need a programmer? Why don't we just get somebody who can run applications that we buy? Isn't that cheaper? And so outsourcing is a big topic that I think needs to be discussed and wrapped up in all of this. Another big aspect of this is competition for expertise. We may want to customize applications. I mean, for example, there are lots and lots of calendaring applications out there. Almost all of them are fairly useless right outside of the box. So we need to develop. If we want to do things that are really cutting edge, we have to develop. But then, is that something we can still afford and get? The IT world has changed. It used to be that we could get people who were interested in innovating and wanted an academic environment because they didn't want to be in the rat race, and we could offer that to people. We would pay less, but we could give other things in return. I know it attracted me. That's not so much the case anymore. You know, the differential in pay is huge. I mean, it's been huge for a long time. But, you know, Google has very nice environments to work in. And so it becomes much harder for us to get people who are prepared to do a lot of innovation, and that limits our ability to do innovation. That limits our choices and what we're going to do as a law school IT department or as a library or anything else in a law school. The other thing that we were talking about that we'll throw out to you for comment is maintenance of things that have been built. One of the big issues that I've got, and I think are common to institutions where innovation has been happening, is if you do something that's worthwhile, of course it's going to stick around. And as it sticks around, it needs to be maintained. But if you want to attract people of talent, you have to offer them an ability to make their own mark. And maintaining the cool thing that's already there is not really nearly as interesting or compelling as having them do something new. So what happens to the old thing that is good and needs to be maintained? It becomes difficult to do. So you want to attract people in, but one of the things they need to do is adopt the thing. You know, I'm not particularly old, I don't think, but I'm not young either. And I've got plenty of time to train somebody else to do what I've been doing. But that's going to be a different person than me. But they have to be willing to do that work, which seems like to a lot of people I talk to that could take it over to be more like scut work in their eyes, and it's hard to do. And there's conflicts in there. I'm looking for gems. I think I found a few, and they need to be polished, but it's a problem.
Yeah, and it's a big. I mean, you know, we actually at CALI we have a huge issue with this tension between innovating, right, building new shiny things for our membership, y'all. Thanks for being members. Because then, you know, well, I mean, you know, we build things. We build things for the membership. right? And so we want to have innovative and the new and shiny things, but there's a balance that has to be struck between that innovative stuff and I don't necessarily like the word innovative for this particular but it's like the best word that there is, but innovative versus maintaining, right? I mean, we've got a system of CALI lessons that dates back 30 some years, right? And yes, some of the lessons are that old. I think they've all been updated, but well, I'm sure you poke around the edge, you can find one from 1976. But we've got over 1,000 lessons. We have tens of thousands of law students that run those lessons, on a regular basis, and we've got a system to. We have an end-to-end process system that goes from the creation of that stuff to the mounting of it on the web, to making it available to students, to faculty assigning it, to students running it, and and then analytics that feed back to the front part to let us know when it's time to update and if stuff isn't being used and stuff. So it's a big. I mean, it's essentially a legacy system at this point, but it needs to be maintained. Right. The problem is that if all we say, well, we don't have anything new this year because we've been maintaining the old stuff, and then people are like, oh, well, that's not exciting, and actually it is sort of, but and one of the but there's that tension between because there's we're all IT departments in law schools and in our case or LII are resource constrained, right? I mean, we don't have. Not only don't we have sort of a bottomless, endless budget, but we don't have access to we don't generally have access to ways to get more resources, right? I mean, we've got some resources, and that's what we need to work with. And so the tension comes in, if I want to build something brand new, then that time spent building that brand new thing is time not spent maintaining something else, basically. And like John said, you can't find somebody who just wants to maintain. Like, I'd be a little worried if I ran up a job ad for we need somebody to maintain our lessons, and somebody's like, oh, I want to do that. Like, no, you don't. I mean, you know what I mean, Sam. I mean, it's like it's a fun and rewarding thing to do, but you need to have some other stuff going on. So that tension. I think is an issue, and and we see it expressed probably in the broader law school thing, like during our session yesterday where we were talking about teaching technical competency stuff, right? And and there's a session later this afternoon about who's going to pay for teaching technical competency, right? And it's that same sort of thing. I mean, law schools are operating under generally more constricted budgets than they have been in the past decade, and yet more and more stuff wants to wants to be pushed in that general direction.
Yeah.
Can I have a comment if I can interject?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Because it made me think, we've got a couple of these legacy systems that have been passed on to different folks or whatnot, and that transitions. You got to learn all the code and how it was developed and everything. And so we've struggled with that. What do you do with this system, and how much do you invest in trying to progress it versus just fix the bugs and whatnot? One of the ideas that came out was making it some sort of open source project, where you could actually get resources from across the community. And I'm just kind of curious if you have thoughts on that, or if you've ever seen a project. I know the training one that you just gave isn't necessarily wouldn't fit that per se, but take an application for managing, your lawyers that have graduated, their profiles. Yeah,
and I think having more open source stuff in the space would be a good idea. One of the problems, though, with one of the issues that surrounds open source stuff is you still need a critical mass of community. So you've got to have a certain number of users before that contributor pops up, right? And so one of the problems with a number of our projects are open source on GitHub. You can go and find them, and but people will occasionally stumble upon them or take a look at them or ask, and we'll show them where they are, and they'll take a look at it and they'll go, okay, that's fine, and then they go away. So in order to get that sort of active, participation, you've got to have enough of a community underneath that for that to bubble up. And that's always been kind of an issue, always been a big issue in the law school tech community, in that it's relatively small. And so it's hard to get that sort of support. It's not that we don't all wish each other well, right? It's just that we're busy with other things, and we don't always have time to contribute. But I think more movement in sort of the open source space, it'd be a great place to start. And I know Tom up there is just like.
No, I mean, I was about to agree with you vigorously.
Oh, okay.
I mean, our experience has been that there are a lot more people out there who care about tagging P3 files than care about what's in the feed. It's just a fact. I actually had a question.
Yeah.
Where are you guys on the peel the Band-Aid slowly versus tear the Band-Aid all at once approach to maintenance, renewal, and innovation? Because I've reached a point, and Sarah will probably shoot me through the head, where I've come to believe that incremental improvement is virtually impossible, and you might as well wait a while for the rest down.
Yeah, I mean,
Sometimes you have a choice.
Yeah, you do, yeah. I mean, sometimes, it's one of the, it's hard. I mean, you do have to make a decision. I mean, for example, we're running Drupal 7 with like some ancient theming that needs to be fixed, and at the same time, we're thinking about, or at least I'm thinking about, what about Drupal 8? And I don't, I'm less excited about Drupal 8 than I have ever been about any of the other previous Drupals. So, I'm not in a. That's a sudden drop off. So, let's just say that sometimes people make odd decisions about their frameworks, and I don't understand why. So, and I don't have to agree with those decisions, but I also don't have to continue using the framework, do I? No. So, but that's a thing. I mean, I like to be able to do incremental sorts of things, especially if they end up with some sort of show of like something that, like, look, we just added this feature, or we fixed this, which we know has been bugging people for a long time, or this works better now, sort of stuff. Because I've got a pretty healthy list of stuff that that falls into that category, and but there are days when you sort of look at it and you just do want to sort of tear it down. But on the other hand, we've spent a long time building it up to the point where there's a certain where we've got a really good level of usage, and we know that like tearing, I know anyway, that tearing it all down, will cost us more, in sort of, community relation value than trying to sort stuff out. So we try to do, incremental stuff, and we also look at, we know where inefficiencies are, and we try to fix things. And we've got we just did we took some downtime, which we don't do, that we do about once a year. We took some downtime over Memorial Day weekend, and I spent some time partitioning the lesson run table. So whenever a student runs a CALI lesson, and you get a row and a table. And that table's now has data, by the way, that runs back 4 systems. So it started out actually as an Access table. The oldest data was exported from Access and into MySQL.
Nice.
Yeah, I know. I get points for that. And then we had the homegrown PHP stuff. And then we switched to Drupal 5 and then 7, or Drupal 6 and then 7. And so it's still, but over the top of the whole thing has been Sam's Viewer, which actually feeds the database. But it grew to 10 million rows. It wasn't indexed properly, and it was just kind of sluggy. So, after looking at it, I figured, I'd try, I figured out what indexes we needed, and that helped. And then I figured, we would partition it by date, because most of the queries that we run against it are date-based. So we partitioned it, broke it up into 8 pieces, and my reference queries went from like 4.5 seconds to 0.07 seconds to run. Just because of the way that MySQL, and by the way, this was only possible in MySQL 5.7, so it had to be upgraded from 5.5 first, which we did last summer, and then we pulled it up from there. But the thing is that for most users, they'll never really see the difference, because that reference query was something we run mostly for reporting. But it is, but the performance increase is going to allow us to do things like, add an element to the page that describes the lesson, and it'll show you how many times that lesson's been run in the last, pick a number, 60 days or 90 days or whatever we settle on. And we can do like hit lists and stuff, top 10 lists and those kinds of things. But we'll be able to run them. We'll be able to run those queries in real time without having to worry about things like caching and all that sort of stuff. They'll slow all that down. And while I was at it, I exposed that table to views inside of Drupal so that we can do all that inside of Drupal. But now I've got the problem of now I've got to go back in and actually add all that stuff into existing Drupal things, which is one of those things that makes you go, do I want to just rewrite this? But one of the reasons why I exposed it to views in the first place was so that I didn't have to write all that extra code. Right? I've got Drupal, it's running, But that's how I incurred my technical debt slide. Because this is actually an illustration of actual technical debt, right? So technical debt happens when you make a decision in the design of something that's sort of the quickest way to get it done, but probably not the best. But the best would take longer, but you figure you'll get back to it later, right? And does anybody not do that? No. Yeah, I know. I try not to do it, but I try not to do it but I've been working on this for a long time, and so the issue was that the Drupal APIs only like Unix timestamps, and we only use datetime strings in the database columns, right? So views, which is a Drupal module, only understands Unix timestamps. And if you try, and it has all kinds of fantastic tools for features for manipulating dates. Like you can just tell it, you can click a button that says, show me everything inside these parameters that's happened within the last 30 days. But only if that 30 days is actually, expressed as Unix timestamps, which ours wasn't. So it was a problem that other people were complaining about, and somebody actually patched views. So they basically just adds like 3 lines of code. Actually, it's only 2, I realized, because 1 line's a comment. So it's literally 2 lines of actual code, but you have to add a patch to a Drupal module, which is something you should never do, because later when I do an update, it's going to cause a problem. So, but the thing is that was the fast and easy way, and kept me on track for getting this done before I went on vacation, which kind of a key thing, right? Well, I was also looking down the barrel of having to get stuff done for the conference and some other things. So I put the patch in, and then that fixed everything. But of course, there's actually a real way to fix it, right? Which is to actually write a custom field handler. And so I actually made a note. These are comments from the GitHub issue where we track stuff that I made. And this, I know it's a little fuzzy, but it says it's working. It actually says I need to remove the hack and fuse and actually create a custom field handler module for it. Now that's going to take me. That'll take me probably 3 or 4 days. But but putting in the hack and acquiring the technical debt took me, it took me a couple hours to identify the problem and find it, and it took seconds to apply that tiny little patch to views, and it just took off. And now the views module in our Drupal repository is non-canonical. So I have to be careful. I have to remember this which I think it's burned into my brain now. Although I could, there could be some sort of emergency views update and then the whole thing's going to go south. But, there's this sort of trade-offs that we make kind of all the time when we're dealing with, dealing with this stuff and like how long. I mean, I'd already spent a bunch of times. You can see the timestamps. This one's like early in March when I actually applied the patch. And then it was later when I got back to it. Because sometimes, I'm working on 2 or 3 projects at once and I end up, putting one down and picking something else up for a week or so, and, it slows me down too. Dan?
No, I was just going to put in my own answer to your question, Tom, is basically that I agree with Elmer, and then the answer to that is it depends. As long as you have a plan, and the plan is the main thing here. I mean, as applications get older and as problems sit and fester and we keep patching them, at a certain point you have to rip the Band-Aid off and start from scratch, and it's probably the best way to do it. May not be, and you may be under a constraint with time and with available expertise. But it's important to have a plan to work toward implementing, which, again, as plans go, they may work out, they may not work out. And, our retirement ages will eventually come along, and that will be that. But we work toward it.
Well, I agree, Joe. My most effective strategy for this is to lay it all out on Sarah. So.
and then change his name and move.
But I'm sorry, Dan.
No, so you talk about like planning and stuff, and I heard like the word decision come in. Like, is there a way to prepay your technical debt at the inset? Because a lot of folks aren't. They're not masters of their own world, right? I mean, we work in a world where we can largely do what we want. LI, CALI, if you're custom code, not to pretty much touch it. But what if people are working on centralized systems and stuff? And even if they're not, is there something? Is there like a couple of really good, best practices at the inset of a project to kind of pay down that technical debt, kind of future-proof it, so that as you go forward, it's like, well. Okay, so like Elmer's talking about what we did with the database in the past little while, and the project he's got going on, and the problem is that there's not more Elmers and Dans and Sams at LII to do it right out of the gate. And if that's an issue when you're accepting a project, that you can't solve that. But is there technical things that you would look at, open source versus closed source? Can I get my data out of my collaboration software when Microsoft buys and screws it up? Are there any practices like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes me think a little bit, talking about closed source, going back slightly before my time when people first started doing things like digital repositories and using brand new systems that people were inventing at the time that ended up using proprietary formats that are long defunct at this point. And we very quickly learned, don't do that. And we started learning about open formats, and then we became passionate about open source, so you don't get stuck in anybody's system so that when they go out of business, you're out of business too. But, the other side of that is that, systems that I built before they were good repositories, there was decent repository software out there, is that I've kicked things down the road a little bit, but I've got a similar problem. I don't have a vendor going out of business, but someday I'm going to go out of business. And I need somebody else there. So what's going to help with that, though, is actually similar kinds of considerations as to the lessons we learned back then, which is, okay, don't use a proprietary system, but for me, an analogy to that is don't use custom tags all over the place that nobody else can understand. Use Dublin Core, even if it may not be optimal, so that somebody else can come later on, look at it, and understand what the hell I was trying to do more easily. or at least there's a better chance of it. Trying to get changed to using repository software so that somebody coming along after me will have at least some familiarity and expertise with the back end of my system, rather than having to delve into the gobbledygook I've got now.
It's something that we've certainly done for a long time. I've actually learned the finer points of it have to do really with assessing the robustness of the developer community that's around the open source product. Because a lot of the stuff we use is pretty niche, or you have choices between competing Drupal modules that do the same, or what have you. And you look at that and say, okay, well, when was the most recent commit on this? Is anybody actively developing? How many developers are actually participating in this thing, or is this just the private obsession of some guy who's going to go get a real job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You learn to assess that kind of fragility in the open source stuff too, because it is there, no question. I think one of the lessons we learned, certainly through the early part of the 2000s, and maybe more recently than that, is that some of the companies that appear to be invulnerable to that sort of change, look like they're going to be around forever on the commercial side, can come and go pretty damn quick. Tailored solutions, where are you now? At one point, that looked like an unstoppable juggernaut. You could say the same thing about this in plastics.
I mean, one of the things that I feel like I've done well, because I was thinking about it the whole time, is that, again, I started writing systems when there wasn't really any good thing I could buy or download to help me. But in the back of my mind was always, at some point, this is going to have to be maintained and almost certainly converted to something else. So every time I've built something, I've made it simple and open enough so that, somebody may look at my code and go cross-eyed, but nevertheless, the MySQL tables are there, and the data can be gotten out and slurped into something else.
So you built something so you could get out of trouble as fast as you got into trouble.
Yeah, and that's always been one of the things that I've always thought about when I get myself into trouble.
Yeah. Actually, I think the last time I got seriously surprised, I think that was from the Google project. It looked terribly advantageous to me for a while to build a bunch of configuration front ends in Google Sheets, because they were stuff that anybody could maintain as far as putting configuration. The problem is that they changed the standards for the code libraries for accessing this stuff once every Thursday.
Yeah.
And it just surfaced within a matter of months. It was unmistakable.
So that's an example of the last commit, making decision on the last commit was probably.
Yeah, and also looking around the developer forums a little bit, because the chances are if you're bitching about it, somebody else is too, and you can very often get a pretty good read on how fragile stuff is just by looking at who's complaining, or how many places you look at Stack Overflow and see a large community of people admiring rather than solving a problem. That's a pretty good indicator.
Did something?
Yeah, so the practice of software engineering has evolved a lot in terms of starting to move towards a lot of more development or test-driven development practices. Like this particular example here, one of the things that troubles me is that if you're in the practice of changing code that isn't really yours, like you're trying to write some sort of compatibility layer that changes some sort of like DLL or something that doesn't natively, I would propose that you've got a different sort of problem, because you've created a different risk for yourself, and then you can no longer update that product safely. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I've done it before, and in much bigger ways than this. This is a little one. Yeah. I mean.
So I think in this particular case, if this particular module is out somewhere on GitHub, that you probably could have submitted a pull request.
Oh, there actually is a pull request. So this patch, I should say that this patch came directly from, there's a Drupal, you can't read it again, There's actually a Drupal issue and a comment. This is pulled out of a comment. The patch is in a pull request, but the guy who's the maintainer for views thinks that people who use date timestamps should be drug out and whipped in public square as opposed to Unix timestamps. And so he's resisted putting this stupid patch in for like 3 years.
Then simply fork it. And
well, but then then it's Drupal and it's views and you're running up against a big community. It's a weird thing because like typically I would only do a patch like this in a situation where I'm really sort of pushed to the wall and stuff. I've got a couple other Drupal modules that I've hacked up severely that I've forked, so that I don't run into this problem. And the reason, I had built one of the custom modules for one of the field handlers, and I just frankly I was running out of time and I was tired and I was like, I need to get this done because, like I said, I was going on vacation, and so I just this is what ultimately I did. I mean, initially I put the patch in for testing because the other thing is we test like everything, right? So even when we were partitioning those tables, I made Dan build me a copy of our production database, like right down to the same, it was a replica in AWS of the whole thing, the same instance size and everything, so I could get time, so I knew how long it would take, so I knew that it would take 37 minutes to partition that million-row table, so I could figure out how much downtime we needed. So we tested the whole thing out, and and you're right. I mean, typically you don't want to do something like this, but it happens, right? In the sort of moment, or you end up with situations like John described, where you know that there's a better way to do it, or you've done it, a certain way in the past, and you want to, get, it might be the best that you can do right now. I mean, I have been in situations where I've built software that I know that there's probably a better way to do it, but I'm not, I wasn't quite up to it at that point in time to actually develop that, but I needed the software, so I went sort of shortcutted it. And when you work I work almost exclusively in PHP these days, and man, you can shortcut all kinds of stuff in PHP, right? And which is the knock that PHP takes, right? They say it's insecure. PHP isn't insecure. PHP programmers are insecure is the actual problem. But so yeah, I mean it is what it is.
There's one comment I wanted to make about that, and you did not say this, so I'm not attributing anything to you, but it just caused the thought to fire off in my head, in the back of my head as you were speaking. Is there's a certain amount of caution that's really important to have when you're doing development, but at the same time, too much caution is a terrible, terrible thing.
Yeah.
And because, I'm in the library world, and people can come up with very creative and very numerous reasons why we should never do anything about anything and just keep paying vendors for doing it for us. And, that's why my profession's in the kind of troubles it's in right now to a great, well, no, that is the reason my profession's in the trouble it's in. If that's the kludge you need to put in to make progress right now, go ahead and freaking do it and take the risks.
I would disagree with that, honestly. Actually, it's from just like a project management standpoint here, from essentially just managing the overall quality of the solution I'm producing. I'd much rather wait until you got back from vacation and took the 2 days to put it together properly, rather than have it put in.
Yeah, but then I got back from vacation and I had to organize this. I mean, this literally, if I hadn't done this wouldn't be done now. And that's literally what it comes down to, because there's nobody else. We don't have another Drupal developer, right? So all that lands on me. I want to hear from Nick. Nick, what do you got?
I just wanted to point out, you skirted around the comment earlier about how you don't understand why Drupal made certain decisions in their framework. It's exactly for this. right? I mean, I presume the decisions you're talking about is switching everything to a Symfony-based backend.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, the whole concept with the PHP development community in general is moving towards much smaller components that are much more portable and extensible.
I know, and I don't like it.
But you don't like it, but you would not have had to change their code. You could have extended their class with your own code.
Well, no, that's what I would need to do.
But you could have done this without. You could have done your patch, making it support dates without actually touching their code.
Okay, I get it.
Then it would have been.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Because you could just make your own.
Yeah, because in Drupal 7, right, because in Drupal 7 what you need to end up doing ultimately is you have to capture the field I think it's a field, right? You have to capture the field definition as it's coming through views and then alter what happens and then stick it back in. And that's, it just adds another layer of stuff to the whole operation. So.
Tom?
That's the right thing, because you're not changing a vendor module at that point. It's
That's
sort
right.
of like the same concept of, like in the Windows world, if I was going to go reverse engineer some Windows DLL and then make a binary patch to that DLL and then ship my application with that. That's just...
Yes, I wouldn't do that anyway. Yeah.
Tom?
This is arm wrestling over the process that I think continues a set of assumptions that have been present throughout the whole discussion, which is that you are actually in control of your project management schedule. And an awful lot of the time, you're not. And all the more so in law schools and all the more so now. So if I look at what's really kicked over the bucket in our shop over the last couple of years, it's been external problems with security mandates. It's been GRDP compliance. It's been Section 508 stuff, et cetera, et cetera. All of them external mandates, all of them having to be dealt with now. All of them subject to conflicting directives from 17 different university stakeholders who feel they own some piece of the problem, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where the bulk of our stuff is. I mean, we do have days where we could just sit back and pump out web hits, right? but that's the kind of stuff that's flying in our heads, right? I see this.
Yeah.
If you would, how extensive is your PM process? Like, do you go through a process of actually building out a full scope of work for it, so you really have a full understanding of who's responsible for which requirements, who's responsible for it?
We have 4 engineers and an engineering manager. We have had 2 lengthy positions for over a year.
Okay.
And we are putting out 500,000 pages to 35 million people. Does that answer your question?
I mean, it's just on the project management thing. It's for small organizations, right? So in a lot of law schools, you can do more advanced, you can do project management, right? But like, I'm the project manager, the developer, the quality assurance engineer, the person responsible for laying out the agenda for the conference, keeping the website running. Well, actually, Dan keeps the website running, so and a bunch of stuff like that. So I use things like Kanboard for like tracking projects, and we use the issue queues in GitHub to track things, and I set deadlines and I try and stick to them. So I do things like this, but in terms of like sort of a formal, sometimes I feel like I need to sit like, you have the 2 chairs on either side of the table, and you sit down in one, you say something, and you hop around to the other one and say something. That's how my project management works a lot of times, Or I can work on something with Sam and drive him nuts with project management things, but mostly then he just goes, yeah, okay, and does what he needs to do, and and then stuff gets done. So, a lot of the, I mean, I agree with everything you've said, and you're right. In the, and in different environments, in different situations, I would certainly do those sorts of things.
Yeah, as do I.
Yeah.
I mean, paid to be dismissed of it, it's just that we're not scaled for it.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
trying to make it happen.
Yeah, and in law school IT departments, they might not even have any. I mean, there are a lot of law school IT departments out there. I don't know how many of them are represented here that consist of sort of, that are some sort of director, a web person, and maybe somebody handling, classroom technology, and that's it, right? So anything that needs to happen in terms of and notice I didn't say like a help desk person because they're all the help desk, right? So they're all running around, changing toner cartridges and stuff, plus doing all those other things. And when I was the IT director at Cornell, I had 7 people working for me, and I had a secretary, and it was awesome, right? We could do project management, and we got stuff done that way. When I went to Emory, it was a much smaller staff, and I didn't have a secretary anymore, and the project management stuff was a lot. Wasn't non-existent, but it was different, just because there were fewer. It's just you had to scale back on some of that stuff. So.
Well, part of this is the essence of what we do and what we've been doing. We're not commercial organizations, and we're doing something that is not necessarily going to make us a profit. It's something that we see needs to be done, and we're doing it. And so how do you get the money to do that? How do you afford to do it? You do the best you can.
Yeah.
And that's how the technical debt in the kinds of operations we have gets generated in the first place. If we followed all the best practices, we wouldn't have the kinds of problems we often come up with. But quite frankly, a lot of times we wouldn't be able to do the stuff that we really feel needs to be done. So you're right.
Let's hear from Sarah.
Sarah.
Following on that slightly, and then I have an additional point. I would go back to the analogy between financial debt and technical debt, right? If I need a car to get to work and I don't have the cash to buy the car, then I'm going to take out a loan. And that loan will enable me to have a car that gets me to work, that gets me a salary, that enables me to pay off my car, right? And I think that a lot of what you see in a lot of these operations is deliberate taking on some technical debt in order to try out an idea. Because if you wanted to build robust software, it would take longer and you wouldn't have the opportunity to try that idea. Maybe you can try 5 ideas in the amount of time that you would take to build software for one of your ideas in a completely robust way. On the other hand, at some point, you do have to be making payments, right? And if you have the ability to pay down some of that debt, you can recover some of the resources. And the question is, how do you get any leverage on the situation? And as my director was just mentioning, in my shop, we were down 2 out of 3 developer positions for basically an entire year. And so this was a very present question for us. I do think an emphasis on more modern software development methodology is important. There are tools that are available that make it possible to containerize an application and make it movable and self-sustaining in a way that just was not available to us years ago when we were developing some of our applications. And that can radically shift the kind of timeline on which certain kinds of moving tasks need to be done. And I think that just as an example, when we were really suffering because every time something went wrong, had to pull up their sleeves and pick up emergency tasks that were far outside their areas of specialization. I had a tech specialist taking care of web problems. I had a DevOps specialist taking care of web application problems. 2 of us jumping in from time to time also taking care of some problems. And what gave us some breathing room was looking at the repetitive daily tasks that we were still doing by hand and asking the question, if we are doing these tasks by hand because we are inspecting the data output manually in order to ensure that we're really happy with it. What kind of tests would we require in order to satisfy ourselves that it's good enough? And that was a pretty painful process because specialists are not necessarily very confident, and especially specialists who have a lot of experience with truly disgusting, messy, dirty data, are not very confident in feeling like they're going to be able to catch everything just by referring back to the historic examples of things that have gone wrong. But bit by bit, going through that process and deciding on a standard of quality that is acceptable and implementing automated tests and taking manual tests off our desk actually has freed up some time and some breathing room to start to get back on track as far as the development engine is concerned. So although there is the religion of test-driven development on one end, and I don't think that is a shift that every development shop has to do from every single thing that they do. On the other end, automated testing as far as paying off technical debt and turning applications from things that have to be maintained by the one individual person, and heaven forbid they should get sick one week and the software not be able to be maintained and that's going to break. It supports the shift from being in that kind of orientation to having some self-documenting tests that in a machine-readable way can tell you whether or not the software is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And at that point, maintenance becomes, at least in our experience, a far less confusing task because you have defined in a formal way all of the things that the original developer or subsequent developer identified as the most important things that the software do, even if a formal project management methodology was not implemented from the very beginning of the software. So I think we're pushing a little bit on how to retrofit some of this applications.
Yeah, one of the things that we've done extensively, and to kind of build on that, I think there's a couple of strict adherence to test-driven development there who still believe that 100% testing is the way to go. But at least in our experience, one of the things that has really benefited us is kind of adherence to more of the Pareto principle around testing. So we try to test 80 to 90% of our highest risk code. That's what we're really focused on. There's plenty of things that we're going to do that are probably going to work just fine. But there are definitely very critical sections of the application to make sure, yeah, that's definitely not putting this in the exact format that we're going to do. We definitely have a piece of data that flows from, in terms of one of our integration tests, from point A to point B, it looks exactly the way that we need it to. And I think it comes down to risk management strategies, making sure that when you're retrofitting tests onto legacy applications or you're building new applications, that you're looking at if this breaks, is this going to cause a disaster in my enterprise system? Is this going to cause a disaster for the end user? And making sure that that stuff works. But in terms of maintaining like a reasonable level of resources being thrown at it, no, you don't test 100%. You maybe test 70 to 80%.
I think one thing I would say, and I guess I'm just feeling sorry for myself here, is that in some respects, when you're doing applications that are based on text processing applications, essentially the data that's delivered to you by others, the level of risk is actually considerably higher because all of this stuff that we process is editorially generated somewhere. It changes a lot, as Sarah says. It can be pretty good. It could be a pretty good example of really disgusting and bad data, which means that there's absolutely no uniformity or consistency with the kind of errors that it's throwing away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a kind of knock-on effect where not only are you dealing with that, you're dealing with the nervousness of developers who have had to deal with it
Yeah, I get it.
and are inclined therefore to stand next to every mouse hole during intently for indefinite
Yeah,
periods of time.
well, an interesting way of solving that particular issue as well, because consider system integrations with our other source systems as your, like text inputs, whatever it is, as high risk. And so we actually maintain essentially quality standards for the code that we're